The January 6th committee will hold a high-stakes vote later today that focuses on charging another Trump ally with contempt of Congress. Lawmakers are weighing potential charges against Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official apparently involved in the former president's attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. Clark appeared for his deposition last month, but then he refused to answer any questions. Nikole Killion joins me from Capitol Hill with more. So, Nikole, this is interesting. But first off, can you just remind us why Mr. Clark is an important figure in the committee's investigation into the January 6th attack on the Capitol? And also, when he appeared in front of the committee, what did he say? Did he say, I can't remember? Or, how did he not answer the committee's questions?
Well, in terms of why the committee is interested in him, Jeffrey Clark was a former Department of Justice official, and he was relatively obscure, but kind of came into play during the former president's quest to try to overturn the election, so much so that at one point the former president considered installing Clark as an acting attorney general over his then acting attorney general, Jeffrey Rosen. And at that time, a number of Justice Department officials threatened to resign if the president had moved forward with that. So that is why they want to speak with Mr. Clark. He had proposed sending a letter to some states encouraging them not to certify their election results. So that is why he is a person of interest to this committee. He did appear for a deposition a couple of weeks back, but in essence refused to answer many of the questions the committee posed. And so now the committee has filed this contempt report where they do detail a number of instances where they feel Clark and his attorney have basically been non-compliant in terms of responding to their request, which is why they intend to move forward with this contempt vote later tonight. And if it does pass out of the January 6th committee, it would then go to the full House for a vote.
I think this is kind of interesting because, Steve Bannon's contempt charge, we talked about before, that it would serve as a warning to others that you can't just not show up when you're subpoenaed. But here we have someone who showed up, and the panel is saying you can't just show up and not cooperate. I mean, you have to basically go the extra mile. You have to be a participant, or you may face the same fate as Steve Bannon, who didn't show up at all.
And I think that's why, too, you're seeing this delicate dance, if you will, with Mark Meadows. Of course, now we understand that he is to a certain extent cooperating with the committee, but don't forget that they threatened contempt against Meadows as well, because up till now he really had not been cooperating with the committee. He did not show up for a deposition last month, and so that did prompt the committee to threaten contempt charges against him. But now it appears that he is engaging with the committee. We learned that yesterday, and that he is slated to appear for a deposition potentially as early as next week. So, that was the committee's hope, is that, by, penalizing someone like a Steve Bannon, that would send a signal to others. But look, each person is their own individual in terms of how they handle their interactions with the committee. And in the case of Mr. Clark, he, chose not to comply. And as you said, now the committee is taking action to that effect.
The panel interviewed Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger yesterday. Who could forget the infamous phone call between him and former President Trump in which the president appeared to be pressuring him to overturn the election results in Georgia? I imagine that phone call came up.
Well, the Secretary of State did not say. He did say that, for the most part, they discussed the 2020 election and the post-2020 election issues. He also said that as far as that call was concerned, it's kind of been out there. So should we assume that came up? It's certainly a possibility, but he would not confirm one way or the other. He really said this was about setting the record straight. As you know, he just came out with a book not too long ago where he also tries to set the record straight about what happened with respect not only to that call, but with respect to, the results, because ultimately former President Trump did not win the state of Georgia. He didn't carry it. And that was a message that Raffensperger was trying to convey to the former president at the time, and refused to go along with his request at that time to, quote, find him more votes. So certainly, again, this just goes to show that, the January 6th committee is really interested in a couple of things, certainly what led up to the run-up of January 6th, but more specifically also these efforts to try to overturn the election results, not just with the violence that we saw on the 6th, but even prior to, because you'll recall that call with Raffensperger happened about 2 days prior to the 6th.
Yeah. So you did bring up former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and you said that he is cooperating, but to what degree he's cooperating perhaps is still up for debate. What kind of information has he been able to hand over?
Well, it appears he's handed over some documents to the committee, and again, according to Chair Benny Thompson, he will appear for an initial deposition soon. Some committee members suggest that could happen again as soon as next week. But, look, as far as Mark Meadows is concerned, this has been a back and forth between this committee for some time. As you see there, he's been producing records and that they expect Mr. Meadows to provide more information as requested. But that really is kind of the sticking point as far as cooperation is involved, right? Because Meadows' attorney has made clear that they still believe that there are certain areas where Meadows may have the right to executive privilege. And so in terms of their level of cooperation, his attorney made clear in a statement to CBS News yesterday that certainly he is willing to engage on non-privileged topics. So again, unclear exactly what that means, but it does seem like as far as Meadows and his attorney is concerned, he is willing to share some, but maybe not everything at this time, again, kind of citing that argument of executive privilege.
And then in regards to the documents, if there's one thing that the former President Trump is practiced at in both his private and public life, it's using the courts to sort of delay. Trump's lawyers are now asking a federal appeals court to use executive privilege to block the committee's access to his White House records. What will happen if they cannot stop the release of those records?
Well, look, this is quite an interesting debate. This was something that, the arguments lasted, I believe, upwards of 3.5 hours yesterday for a court hearing that was really supposed to last less than an hour. But it really boils down to, who has the ultimate say in terms of executive privilege. Is it the current president or is it the former president? In terms of the current administration, they have made clear that, President Biden is waiving executive privilege in this instance, that he and his administration don't feel it's justified, that they believe these documents that the National Archives holds, that the Select Committee wants to get its hands on, call logs, visitor logs, speech drafts, etc., memos, that should be released to the committee. But you have someone like the former president saying, well, look, I was a former president at that time. I should have a say in this. And furthermore, there's the politics of the situation, right, and the precedent that sets if, in fact, the current president, who was the opponent of the former president, okays the release of these documents. There is some politics behind that, and that's the concern of the Trump team and his legal team, because they feel like, well, why, there could be other motives for trying to release this stuff, and we should be don't want to set that precedent for other presidents down the road when they're opposing parties in terms of who should be privy to these records. So that's kind of the argument that was made in court yesterday. And again, it remains to be seen how it will be resolved. But the committee has made clear that they do want to get their hands on those documents. Even without those, though, they continue to move forward with their investigation. That records request was part of a broad records request across a series of federal agencies. And so we do know some of those other federal agencies, whether it's Justice Department, FBI, Department of Defense, they have gotten cooperation and been able to access some records from those agencies. But these National Archives records are critical because, again, this reflects what the president may have been doing around January 6th.
Listen, before we let you go, I want to talk about the fear of rising inflation and the economy. There's another warning from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen about rising inflation. There are some experts who felt like what we're dealing with now in relation to inflation is directly connected to the coronavirus. And once we sort of finally emerge from this pandemic, things will course correct. But now we have a new variant that we're all concerned about and ongoing supply chain issues. What was their message to lawmakers?
Well, interestingly, in terms of the Federal Reserve Chair, and both of them will be testifying again today before the House. They testified before the Senate yesterday, but the message of the Federal Reserve Chair is that, look, you know, in his view, he thinks this word transitory should be retired when we're talking about inflation, and that really did kind of spook the markets. It dropped several hundred points yesterday because they saw that as a sign of, you know, acknowledgement that, you know, this inflation issue may be more than just a blip on the radar, and that is certainly something that Republicans in particular seized on those comments. In terms of Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, she was very emphatic with respect to the debt limit, which is another issue that, of course, has to be addressed by this Congress, that they really can't play around with this, you know, too much more past December 15th, although there's, again, some debate about whether there's some wiggle room with that date. So she implored Congress to move expeditiously in terms of trying to pass the debt limit, which is another critical issue which could, in essence, put the brakes on the economy if Congress doesn't act.
All right, Nikole, thank you so much.
You bet.